Hi, today I'm going to demo PrivateChatbot. PrivateChatbot has three main products. So the main one is the web version here. Then we have a desktop version, which lets you use private models, as opposed to the web version, which only uses public models such as OpenAI's model or Claude. And finally, we have the PrivateChatbot SDK. So first, I'll show the web version, which is very similar to the desktop version, but it uses only Claude and OpenAI. So to begin with, we have the screen here. So I'm logged in under my email address. And then once I'm here, I can now upload a file. So this can be any file on your computer. So for this purposes, I have an example financial statement. So we upload that document, then as you can see, it appears on this right-hand side here. In addition, on this right-hand side, we have several options that we can pick. We have the 10K Edgar model selection, as I said, OpenAI or Claude. And then if we're using OpenAI, we can enter our own fine-tuned model key. So we'll enter OpenAI. Then the next test type is if we use 10K Edgar. So what this means is we can enter a company ticker. So that's just the 4-digit code. So for example, AIPL for Apple, or for example, Microsoft. So we click that. It'll take some time to process a document, and all of this happens on the back end. So we don't even have to have any of these documents on our computer. Once that takes some time to process, we'll then be able to chat with the documents in the same way as the ones that we have on our own device. So now we can see it's here in the uploaded files. So for both of these, we can then ask any question we want. So for example, for this financial document that we just uploaded, we could say, "Will you summarize?" As an example. We can ask anything we want, depending on what we want to get out of it. And it'll then give us a long answer here. So we can see that's a report. And we can also click this I button here, and that will show us the sources. So our model takes two most relevant chunks from the PDF. And just to make sure that the model is not hallucinating, or if we want some additional information or background information, we can then access the sources. And here we can read word by word the portion from the text. So that's the first one, and we can see the second source is down here. Yeah, we can keep on asking any questions. For example, can you tell me encoder's net loss this year? So here it gives us a quick answer. You can just see it says this was their net loss. And as I mentioned, we can change this to Claude and ask similar questions. Then going on to Microsoft, we can ask, again, similar questions. We can say, and this is accessing the 10K, which is the annual report of Microsoft. So this is great, as our product does all of this in the back end, and as a user, all you need is the ticker MSFT. So you can see its main products and services include operating systems, productivity, etc. And as I mentioned, we can see the I. It says we got it from Microsoft document. We can upload multiple documents, and our logic will help find the most relevant chunk. But in this case, we just had one, and again, we can scroll down and see where the information is coming from. So that's the web version. We then have a very similar version, which is the desktop version, which looks quite similar, but the difference is that it's just Llama or Mistral, which are two private models. And so if we have documents that have sensitive information, or that we don't want other people to know about necessarily, we might want to use this private product instead. So this acts as an app on my Mac. So this is all local to my device, and so therefore everything will stay within my own device. So again, we can go File Uploader. I'll just quickly show an example. For example, we can do the same document. And again, we'll go through the same process. So I won't show too much of it, but essentially this one will take a bit longer because it is using private models, but the trade-off is that you get the privacy. And lastly, we have our SDK. So our SDK is sort of like an API that developers can use. So here I've already created an API key on our website. And from there, all we have to do is initialize the API. So here I entered the key, and to begin with, I don't want this to be private. So that means I'll be using GPT instead of Mistral or Llama, which are the private models that we have. So to start with, this is kind of a very simple way that we can put in our documents. So these are some documents that I already have within this directory, and then you can also put in websites. So this is one of our websites. It's the documentation for PrivateChatbot. And from there, we will use our first function called upload. So we'll upload it. It'll parse through these 3 documents or websites. It'll then create a chat from that, and then we can query questions. So once we have that, we enter the chat ID from here, and then we will ask a question. So for example, this is the first question. Similarly to the web and desktop version, it'll give us an answer, and it'll also give us the sources. So here I'm just doing the print statement. And importantly, what the SDK provides, which the web and the desktop versions do not, is an evaluate function, which will evaluate both how good the retrieval of the chunks is, as well as the accuracy of the response. So here, I'll show you how this works. So I'll just run this simple snippet of code, which is just a short document, which uploads these documents, chats, aka asks a question, and evaluates. And we'll do that twice. So keep in mind this is a public version, so we'll be using GPT as we entered here. So we'll wait a bit for it to parse through the documents and the website. And eventually we should get an answer as well as the sources. So we're waiting for it to load here. Depending on the size of your documents or how many documents you upload, this could take more time with us. So here we have our first answer. I'll zoom into this a little bit just so we can see. But what we have here is our first answer. So I uploaded one of our research papers and just asked it a simple question. So who wrote the paper? We can see that the paper was written by XYZ. And as I mentioned before, we can see the sources. So this will show you which document it came from, and then it'll show you the chunk. This is very similar to the web and desktop version, but this allows developers to build products on top of our existing logic. And it'll always show 2 sources, so this is the second source, and it uses both of the sources in finding its answer. Then finally, on the evaluation, we can see the relevancy. And for a second answer, as we can see, it is pulling from our documentation, and it says that PrivateChatbot is a tool that enables enterprises, etc. So we can upload these 3 documents that are all about very separate things, and based off our question, our model will infer which document is most relevant and will take the chunks from that document. So that makes it very user-friendly. Now I'll show a very similar thing, but what I'll do is change this to being private instead. So very simple. When initializing it, all you have to set it to be is private true or is private false. If you wanted to do both of them within one same document instead of one at a time, all you could do is just say private chatbot 1, and then you could say private chatbot 2, and each one could be either private or not private. So for example, this could be the not private one, and then you would change these respectively. But for now, I'll just change this to be true. And what I'll do is uncomment this code that I wrote up, which is very similar. As you can see, it's the same documents, but instead we're just calling llama. So llama instead of GPT. And we're asking similar questions. Who are the authors of the paper? What is private chatbot? And we'll see the answer that it gives us this time. So keep in mind, although the information and the answers might be the same, it might be worded slightly differently because it is a different large language model. So again, it'll take some time to parse through the documents. You actually only need to upload once. And from there, if you store the chat ID, you can then just chat and evaluate. And so the speed will be much faster. So you don't have to upload it every time. But for the purposes of this demo, we have our first answer. We can see that it gave similar results. It does format it in a slightly nicer way. That is just llama. You do have to install llama on your device beforehand. As I said, this is all private, so none of your information is leaving your own computer. And again, we can see the sources, and finally, we can see the evaluation stats that it gave us. So it seems like our answer was pretty good. The second one, which is from the documentation, our answer is given here. And again, if we scroll down to the faithfulness and answer relevancy, again, it seems like we got a pretty accurate answer. So overall, those are the 3 private chatbot products, and each of them are for very different use cases, but all of them have a similar backend logic, which parses the documents and lets you answer questions and retrieves relevant chunks and sources. And then, especially with the SDK, will help you evaluate whether your answer is good or not.